Right. So it is 6:35. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the Calais Select Board for the purpose of discussing a open litigation and a bill. Hey, Wilson.
That's Wilson Hughes.
It is. So the purpose of this meeting is to take into consideration a settlement agreement that was received from Ms. Shedd and related to open litigation. So finding that, so for members of the public who are attending this, there is an intention to go into executive session relative to sensitivity of the agreement that we're going to be considering. But we are planning to make a statement after the executive session. And since there are members of the public present, we'll make some time to hopefully get that feedback. We have a pretty brief period of time before a special meeting at 7 with the DRB. So I'll try to be as sensitive to participation as I can. So finding that premature public discussion of the proposed agreement and the status of the pending litigation would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage. I'm going to request that somebody make a motion to enter executive session under 1 VSA 313A 1E, which is related to pending litigation, and F, which is the review of confidential attorney-client communication for the purpose. Moved by Anne. Give me a second.
Second.
Jamie. Any further discussion?
Nope.
No. Thank you. We are going to go into executive session, stop recording, and we are all in favor, please. Thank you. Any opposed? No.
Nobody.
And no select board members on Zoom at this time.
Oh, Bill's not there.
He does not appear to be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Continue. Yeah.
Right, because we'll.
Yeah.
And just want to let everybody know that that we just voted to come out of executive session. Just give me a moment here. We do have some other members of the public who went outside briefly while we were in executive session, so we're just waiting for them to have the opportunity to come back in.
Jordan, I'm gonna need the exact length.
Yep.
And I
I'll
can't
provide
do
those.
these minutes with it.
I understand. Very good. After,
Did you find Ann out there, Ann?
oh yeah.
I just kind of waved at everybody. I don't know if she saw me. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just wrapping up the other meeting. On the shed. No, we can. We ended executive session. There's just somebody who came for that meeting that is missing.
Oh, where did she, I thought maybe she went upstairs. She kind of went back.
Okay, great, thank you. He found her, yes.
Oh, is she good enough?
They can-
Yeah.
Yeah, she can get in that door.
That's on the-
Yeah. Oh, is she not?
That's hard.
Oh, no, she went away.
Are we paused right now? Or are we?
Not exactly. I mean, we are technically recording, the meeting. We're just trying
It'll
to,
be timely at 7.
probably about 5 minutes over.
It's.
Yeah, I think, sure, let's do that. That seems important. Thank you. So after going out of executive session, we'd like to report that the select board has reached an agreement regarding its. Yep, I sure can. Regarding desired changes that we would like to propose to the agreement that was originally sent to us by Ms. Shedd's attorney. And would like to offer the following statement for the public, after which we'll entertain some other commentary from the public as well. So this was kind of a lengthy statement. I'll try not to go too fast for me. It's either way fast or real slow. In May 2022, the town impounded the horses owned by Elizabeth Shedd on Collar Hill Road that were running at large in violation to the town's then applicable ordinance regulating livestock running at large. In December 2022, following a trial, the civil division of the Vermont Superior Court issued a permanent protective order that, among other things, authorized the town to continue to impound the horses until Ms. Shedd satisfactorily completed certain improvements to her property set forth in writing through a notice of remedial actions served on her legal counsel by the town. In response, Ms. Shedd sued the town, challenging the notice of remedial actions. The lawsuit remains pending in Vermont Superior Court. In the meantime, Ms. Shedd has been deprived of her horses for over 2 years, and the town has incurred costs exceeding $55,000 to board and provide veterinary care for the horses. The town has also amended its ordinance regulating livestock running at large to provide additional remedies available to the town for repeat violations of the ordinance, including the authority to temporarily or permanently remove an owner's right to maintain livestock in the town. Ms. Shedd seeks the return of her horses and understands the potential consequences if the horses run at large again. She has agreed to fully reimburse the town's impoundment expenses and to take other steps to minimize the risks to public for the horses potentially running at large. The select board believes that at this time, it has come to the end of the pending litigation, or it's time to come to the end of the pending litigation.
Start that sentence again, please.
The select board believes that at this time, that the time has come to end the pending litigation and its ongoing boarding expenses and return the horses subject to terms and conditions of the settlement agreement with Ms. Shedd. Any future issues, should they arise, will be promptly addressed under the town's ordinance regulating livestock running at large as amended, and that the permanent injunctive order and or the other provisions of Vermont law. So that is kind of a summary of our situation to date and a summary of kind of the conditions that were put in the proposed settlement agreement, which is both a settlement agreement and a motion to dismiss the current litigation with prejudice. So that's what has been brought to the consideration of the select board. We have members, or a member of the, actually Wilson is also still on Zoom. So if there's any questions at this time. Oh, another thing that I'd like to note is that we are sending a modified version of the proposed agreement that will uphold the original injunctive order. And that is going to be, any final agreement would be subject to Ms. Shedd's acceptance of the proposed edits, and it would also then have to go to the Superior Court for final acceptance. So that's kind of the status of this particular proposal.
At the time, a couple of years ago, there were certain conditions that Elizabeth had to meet to be able to have the horses come back. Are those still in effect, and are they going to be enforced by the town?
So I can answer this the best I can. The extent to which the town has requested remedial actions, the list of the remedial actions relative to when we took possession of the horses is in part what is still pending litigation and has been challenged by Ms. Shedd. So the original injunctive order from the town's perspective validated the need to take the horses into impoundment and to issue remedial actions relative to the circumstances. The remedial actions that were proposed were extensive relative to everything involved in the situation. And those were being challenged through open litigation and have put us at somewhat of an impasse at this point.
Where does that come from here?
Well, the injunctive order, the court's opinion on the injunctive order stands. And
So
yeah,
if I can jump in.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
sure.
So Elizabeth Shedd proposed a settlement, and she said the settlement would be, give me back my horses and dismiss everything, and I'll pay the money. Our proposal back to her is the rest of the order that requires her to do certain things remains in effect,
Okay,
although we are agreeing to give her possession of the horses.
before that,
She is still required to let the town onto the property, to inspect the property and do the other things that are listed in the injunction. She is also required to get the stallion gelded before she can have that back, and so that. But
does she get the horses back before she? I
She
don't
gets them.
understand why that's happening. If it's in the injunction that she has to meet certain conditions, why does that not happen before she receives the horses?
So to get that clarification, we would need to continue to stay in active litigation, continue to incur the boarding and veterinary fees, go through the court process,
I got that.
and the question of to what extent she will need to perform the remedial actions will need a final answer from the court, which is at this point still outstanding in the current litigation. So that's about as much without getting into speculative kind of interpretations on behalf of the actions of the court and other situations that would kind of put us at a kind of disadvantage to discuss it further. That is kind of the basis of the challenge that we're facing right now.
Well, we dealt with this for years and years, and Elizabeth has absolutely zero credibility about anything that she says she's going to do. For her to get the horses back and put everybody in jeopardy again, and property really doesn't seem okay. And I get that the town spent a lot of money and they'd like it to go away, but there's a history of her father who has a lot of money bailing her out over and over and over for the last 10 years. It just doesn't feel okay for everyone else to have to keep putting up with that. Because I don't think it's gonna change.
I sincerely hear that concern and share that. That has been kind of the root of a very long
I know.
discussion,
I know.
and even longer for you
Yeah.
and the neighbors. And so I do want to acknowledge that, absolutely. We feel as a town that, not only if we can find mutual agreement on this particular proposal, will that help stem the ongoing expense to the town, but also put us in a better position to respond to future offenses, and when they do, or if they do arise. And that is part of our rationale.
No, I got that.
Yeah, there of course are very few guarantees that we can be sure of, but a pretty significant amount of consideration has been put into it, and we do feel like we only have a few options. This is the only time I'd say that I've been a party to the dialogue where we have seen any particular engagement around any kind of action at all.
Yeah.
And so that is,
You know, it's going on for.
that's part of what informs it.
So when she gets the horses back, next day Buffy goes down and looks at the situation with the horses. It's very unhealthy. It's a swamp. There's no path through for the horses. So we're gonna go right down and checking it out.
That's a good question. I think that's going to be a question for a welfare question that would need to be addressed with the state, I believe, would govern that particular issue.
Why not the town? Since it's a town ordinance.
The town ordinance is a livestock running at large ordinance. So it largely is related to the confinement and control. That's correct. I know the state has been kind of wrestling with situations like that, and because in certain situations they are kind of integrally tied, but for Calais at this time, they're separate issues.
Okay. Guess that's it.
And please feel free to reach out and keep in touch. I know, I trust you will. Yeah. So.
I put a name for everybody here in attendance to put your name on the attendance sheet if you're here for the 7 o'clock meeting.
Thank you. And again, I do apologize that we're running behind for the 7 o'clock. At this point, unless are there any further questions from for the select board or members from the public? Okay.
Can I just ask, how do you spell your name? Is it A-N-N?
A-N-N-E, L-Y-N-N.
L-Y-N-N, thank you. Most of the minutes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, thanks for coming. I know we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Play.
So with that, I would ask for a motion authorizing the select board chair execute the settlement agreement with Ms. Shedd on behalf of the town, subject to the edits reviewed during executive session as advised by the town's attorney.
So.
Second.
Second.
Jean.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. And really sorry about that.
Thanks, Jerry. So I'm gonna need that language.
Yeah.
For both the statement and the motion.
I don't think we need to start a second meeting. Right. Well, strong. Oh,
Oh, did Wilson?
he was on mute and didn't. And there's Bill. I think it's been on there. Now I need to figure out wireless display.
Or if it's still waiting to be let into the.
I think I just let you in, I'm sorry.
Hi.
So you're taking this.
Yeah, for this meeting, I didn't know about that.
That one,
It was a
We took care
surprise
of-
meeting.
it was
Yeah.
a pretty quick addition to our lives. Okay. Well, we're 10 past or 9 past, so I'd like to call the, oh, perfect timing, Buffy, thank you. I'd like to call the special meeting, joint meeting between the DRB and the Calais Select Board to order. And we'll probably want to do some reconfiguring or moving around, so everyone has a chance to sit at the
And I-
table who's representing the board.
Whoa.
Oh, I see.
Oh, no, that's just the sign-in sheet.
Do you know who's on there personal for this?
I do, Gabriella Molina,
Gosh,
David
where
Delcourt,
do we wanna
Larry Bush,
circle around, right?
Bill Powell. And, oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to put it up on the screen, Rose.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna-
hold on, there's a circle line.
Whatever you like.
Also that.
No.
I'm Candy. Oh.
This would meet you.
I didn't know about that.
Yes, I did too, but.
Need any more? Never mind. Gabrielle Molina,
Yeah,
Larry Bush,
yeah.
and that's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Looks like there's one pen next. Oh, and there's a new one, James. James, could you unmute yourself for a second and just give us the last name? Yeah. Yeah, do it. Do I have to do it? It's telling you. Live. James, can you hear us?
Yep.
Could you provide a last name? For
Sure.
the-
Wells, Wells.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. The purpose of the meeting is to have a joint dialogue between the DRB, and we've worked out a framework for an agenda that includes Gus helping with some moderation to help kind of promote balanced participation by everyone and the public as well. So with that, I'd like to hand over the reins of leading the conversation and leading us through the agenda to Gus, and a chance to go over some more detail on kind of the purpose and how we're gonna move through the dialogue, but I also think it might be helpful just to do maybe some names and
So
intros.
why don't we start with introductions? So I'm Gus Seelig. I've been invited here because of my role as the town moderator. And I've lived in Calais since 1976. And
I'm Stephanie Kaplan. I was a member of the DRB. I'm now an alternate in the DRB. What can I say? I've lived in Calais. I've lived in Vermont for 40 years now, in Calais for 40 years. I was taken off the DRB. One of the reasons I'm here is I'd like to find out why.
I'm Chris Mahali. I'm a member of the select board.
I'm Willa Farrell, I'm the chair of the DRB.
I'm Patty Smith, I'm vice chair of the DRB.
I'm Jamie Morby on the select board.
Jordan Keys and chair of the select board.
Just their select board.
I'm Schaefer, DRB.
the other members of the body. So you're just all the public tonight.
Just the public.
That's the public.
I
deal with it.
Jeff and
Chris Andreessen.
I'm Jared Weiss, Chair of Planning.
Okay, let me say a few things as we get going. And the first is that, this is not, I'm not a mediator, this is not a mediation. I'm not even a trained facilitator, have run a few town meetings. And over the years, been asked to moderate some other discussions, it's I remember most for a bunch of public meetings on ancient roads, which had a number of people up in arms, and where the town offices get built back in the day that we didn't have a town office. So I'll do the best I can. There isn't, as with town meeting, a set of procedures to be utilized for a meeting like this. We got together a few weeks ago. I think it was Willa at that time, and Scott and Jamie and Jordan to knock out an agenda. And the agenda, I think, will probably.
They didn't introduce themselves.
Oh, okay, yeah, for people. Do we have any members of the either body on the screen?
Yeah,
Oh.
Gabrielle is a member of the DRB.
Yeah, Gabrielle's the other one.
Yeah.
Good evening, Gabrielle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gabrielle Molina with the Development Review Board.
And does anybody else on the screen want to introduce themselves? I guess not.
Okay.
Bill Powell, member of the select board. I don't think I need to approve. Oh,
That's
no,
Bill Powell.
that's Bill Powell, not Bill Davis, sorry.
Yeah.
That's a really,
Not
Strong.
speaking for Bill Davis.
yeah, that is fair, Bill. My sincere apology.
At any rate, we got together a couple weeks ago and we knocked out an agenda, and the agenda will not be everything everybody might have wanted it to be, but the decision I think we came to is to have an agenda that would be more future looking than past looking in terms of understanding each other's roles and vision for the community, and what we could do in the future to enhance communication. And that's the agenda you see in front of you. I think we decided we were not gonna discuss issues that have been raised around whether open meeting law has been violated or fundamentally personnel matters, but I guess I will start the meeting just by acknowledging that any of us, hi Scott, we're just getting started, so you're right on time.
Thanks.
And just for with that introduction, why don't you introduce yourself?
Scott Message, member of the DRB, recorder. Witness Rose this year.
Yeah.
So at any rate, that's the agenda we came up with. I do want to acknowledge that anytime anybody applies for a job or has a job and you don't get a job you've applied for, or you're not appointed to a job that you've served in, especially as a volunteer, it hurts. You know, Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the US House, used to say all politics is local, and we had a speaker in Vermont named Al Frank who said all politics is personal. And in my experience, the more local it gets, the more personal it gets. I'll just start by also acknowledging I've got relationships with a whole bunch of people around this table of various types that go back quite a few years. And Jamie, actually, with your family is probably the longest because your great grandmother was a faculty member who taught Marianne at Goddard many years ago.
Right.
Your grandmother and I worked together at Community Action, and she always blamed me for the reference I gave her to get the job with the ACLU, which she did so well. And I have daughters that were going 5 days apart and together all through elementary school, and let's see, Dennis. You first began, what year did you begin at the Green Mountain Club?
Too long ago, Gus, I can't remember.
Yeah, and then we worked together on lots of stuff for the Mountain. So I worked with lots of people and in various capacities. And I think, well, I don't think I knew you were Candy when we met a couple weeks ago. So lots of different relationships, and my job is really not to be taking positions, but to try to just guide the conversation. At town meeting, the rule is you speak to the moderator, not to each other, as a way to depersonalize, I think, in part, the emotion that comes with some issues. I've never tried to enforce that, but if we find it gets tough tonight, I might intervene. We are gonna try to end this meeting in enough time, and this discussion enough time. We will end this meeting in enough time for there to be public comments. Since we started 10 minutes late, we may be 5 or 10 minutes later on the public comment than is scheduled. And I guess I would say that while the warning asks people to speak to the agenda here, I've never found that you can keep people from saying what is on your minds. So we will hear from the public as you choose to speak. And again, if it gets off the point at some point, I may interrupt, but I will try not to do it. So, any questions about the agenda or what I've laid out before we jump in?
Not so much a question, but I think, well, we agreed it would be forward thinking, it would not be to the exclusion of talking about the past. And I just wanted to check in with Jordan that is your understanding as well.
So, with that, the first item is really a discussion of the roles of the DRB and the select board. And I don't know, Willa, if you and Jordan want to take the first cracks at that, or other people want to, how you see those roles?
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly have my perspective. I think, as we've had a conversation about what would be helpful dialogue, I think it's important to hear, what members of each board, kind of, force, I guess not envision but interpret their role, on that board and the purpose of the board. We don't get many opportunities to speak to each other outside of the functions of our meetings, and this would be a good opportunity to hear that, I think. That fair.
And I can just say briefly, I served on the DRB for 2 years that doesn't meet regularly, so I don't feel like I have 2 years of experience. It feels still very new to me. In the spring, I had been vice chair, became chair, and I've learned a lot in the last few months. So in short, I see our role as, taking the zoning regulations that have been approved by the town and using those to make decisions when people's applications come before us. So that is, I guess, in a nutshell, how I've seen the role of the DRB.
Do anybody want, the select board want to speak to what you see the select board's role?
Sure. Well, among other responsibilities, but I think most relevant to this particular one, the select board and its members are the few elected officials in the community who are part of the representative democracy and responsible for representing the interests of the community. And while the select board has the capacity to make changes to the land use regulations, it can do so only in kind of a limited capacity, and or other ordinance and to very specific procedures, and that function largely falls to of crafting or making substantial changes falls to the planning commission, where they also work on edits and changes to the town plan, which collates the feedback and aspirations of the community as a living document and guiding document for how we make decisions. The select board's ability to make appointments to subcommittees is one of its primary ways to influence policy relative to the interests of the community as they've received that feedback and as guided by those documents that get revised incrementally.
I do, because I'd like to say something about the role of the DRB. I can't remember when I was appointed to the DRB this time. It was a few years ago. I was also in the DRB years ago for a while. I'm also a retired land use attorney. And I've been on several different boards and commissions in Calais over the 40 years that I've lived here. I found after the select board went into executive session to talk about the appointments and came out of executive session and voted on some appointments and didn't provide any explanation. And eventually, I guess your lawyer told you do need to provide an explanation because that's what open meeting law says, an explanation for your decisions. You wrote something, I think Jordan drafted it, and the select board issued it. And I was really taken aback at what the reasons were for your appointing those people. Because it had very little to do with, in my view, what a quasi-judicial board, including the DRB and Calais, what the role is. It's a judicial, quasi-judicial. It's not, we like the applicant, or we don't, or we think that we need housing, so therefore we're going to give permits. It's not that at all. And you have this long characterization of Scott and Gabrielle and Janet that I couldn't see anywhere in there where your description of their characters had anything to do with being on a quasi-judicial board, understanding regulations, knowing the Calais regulations, knowing the Calais town plans, having experience with municipal land use. I didn't see any of that, or any quasi-judicial experience anywhere that would be what I would consider the qualifications.
So I just want to say, I found that a very really disconcerting description of what you think is important for DRB members, because it's not a question of my philosophy, you know, or my experience in town. You know, it's a question of, am I capable of reading regulations, applying them fairly, being nice to the applicant, being helpful to the applicant, which we had to do numerous times because they didn't know what they were supposed to provide because the zoning administrator never told them. So the DRB has taken on a very odd role, and that is we had to elicit information from the applicants to see if they actually meet the regulations, because they come to the hearings and they don't even know they're supposed to do that. So to me, the role of the DRB is, as I just said, is to apply the regulations and the zoning regulations and the town plan fairly, politely, and thoroughly. And my philosophy about housing is not relevant to my capabilities and my fairness and my clarity in reviewing and ruling on applications. And I just think it's really important for this select board to understand what the role of the quasi-judicial body is, including the Calais DRB, because it's a quasi-judicial body. And there's actually rules out there that apply to all quasi-judicial bodies in the state. And that's why when there was some upset a few years ago, when the DRB apparently was not always applying the regulations, I agreed to be on the DRB, and town lawyer Jim Barlow at the time put together a training session for quasi-judicial DRB members, because it's different from, it's not like the Conservation Commission, it's not like the Historic Preservation Commission. You have rules that you have to follow. And it wasn't following, and I said, hey, I'll join the DRB again, you know, to just sort of help it get, and then new people came on, and the DRB was functioning really well. It had 2 retired attorneys, and it had other people who had lots of knowledge and understanding of Calais' regulations and town plan and how to apply them, and the DRB was doing great. And then we came along with the situation. So I just wanted to try to clarify all that. Yeah, I agree with everything you said, frankly. I mean, you're absolutely right. That our role is to, let me back up a minute. As I see it, kind of like Jordan explained, you're the quasi-judicial body. You're the ones who hear the evidence and make the decisions. The planning commission is sort of like the legislative body, even though the buck stops with us. They're the ones who write the regulations. Our job becomes to appoint the people and who serve on these bodies. And I agree with you that they need to be people, first, they need to be people of sound judgment, which I think every member is. They need to be people who can apply the law fairly, which you very well articulated just now. They also need to be people who are able to make decisions based on evidence and not on past experience. And you know that of course you know that. But that's not always an easy thing to do. And it needs to be people who feel can do that. We also want, as you said, a range of expertise and life experiences, people who bring different things to the table, and you also articulated that. But there's another thing that I think is important that we think about. We need people, again, we back up. A lot of times, even though you're applying the law, there are times when you use your discretion. For example, no undue adverse effect. That's not something that is just, it is or it isn't. It's something that people bring various values and life experiences to when they make these decisions. And I think I see our job as choosing people who we feel are very able to reflect the values that the town has expressed through its town plan and in any other ways that we might know. We're elected to represent the citizens And it's our job to choose people, well, I think I said it, who understand the desires of the town at whatever given time if it's happening. And I'd be happy to have a more personal discussion about that. I don't want to discuss it about whether or not you reflect the values of the town. I'm just telling you that's one of the things that we have to take into account. I'd like to know how the values of the town are determined and who determines, the select board decides what the values of the town are. The town decides what the values of the town are, and then they find people that reflect the values. To a great extent in the town plan. And yeah, it's a little bit subjective. I agree. I don't disagree with you that it is subjective, but we do the best we can, just as you do the best you can, and we try to determine, is it an undue adverse effect or isn't it? Well, I just think that we should not, I agree that we should probably continue this conversation outside of here. But I would really like to know what decisions I have participated in that did not reflect what was in the town plan. Can anybody answer? Anybody who voted to, I should get off the CRB?
Yeah.
I think we'll have to make
Sure.
and then this, and then we'll continue.
So while I don't serve on the select board, I think as a member of this community, what I told, and this is where I'm going to do a bit of history because I think it's relevant to the discussion, that in the decision-making of the select board to make appointments, that how that process is done is as important as what the criteria are that the select board members use to make decisions. And it was very hard not to talk about what happened this spring. And I think the process was harmful. And I think that it's important for the select board to make decisions as transparently as possible in a way that is respectful of people who volunteer, whether it's for 40 years or 2 years. And I think that what the process, there were harms caused. So I am going to speak a little bit about outside of rules because I feel it's important to do that. And that, so there were like individual, like as Gus named, there's a lot of long-standing relationships in this room. And there was harm done to those that I think is sad. It's really unhealthy and sad. And that it was more than hurt feelings. That process sent a message of disrespect to people who had contributed a lot. The reasons may have been sound, but they weren't quite clear. So it's all the assumptions and second guessing inevitably happens. And I think that without a transparent and understandable, clear process, then people are discouraged. Other people may be discouraged, and frankly, I've heard have been discouraged from participating in community volunteering. And I think because of that, I have seen sort of reaction that in turn has been created other harm. So I feel like there's been a snowball effect that has been not healthy. That is counter to the values that I think we have probably all hold and that are in the town plan. And I guess I'll wind up by saying that I hear that there's discretion involved, obviously, and things are not always black and white. But I will say that, you know, from Anne, who was on the board when I joined, Stephanie, Candy, Ryan, Dennis, and then the newer members, that everybody has been like turning to the words. And sometimes it's like, well, what does this mean? So there has obviously been some element of like uncertainty, but people have, like any lawyer I know, they're always pulling out the green book, and that's what we have a green book too. It's there's own, I guess the plan is green, but so I guess I have seen people really adhere to what I think Stephanie has described as the role of the DRB. And one more thought I want to say. I'll stop there. I can say, but I've spoken enough.
Yes, who's yours?
And so I just want to talk about the roles of the DRB and the select board, yes. A little confused. I heard Stephanie say we're wasn't this judicial body. And we're mandated to follow the town plan and the zoning regs. And I heard Jordan say this is the select board's opportunity to influence policy. And by the people that they choose. We're not a policy setting body, as I understand. We are a body who's applying the regs from the town plan. So, you know, as you make those appointments, you know, what's the, I never had the expectation that we were a policy setting.
So if I could speak to that a little bit, I think that's in part kind of what I was kind of hoping to get to. Maybe somebody can help keep me on track. So I'd like to take maybe 2 steps back, and break a little bit of a rule, and talk about the appointment and the process through which the appointment decisions were made. And Stephanie, it's hard for me to you and the rhetoric that has been fairly public, and I know that that it feels very personal to not be reappointed, but the decision of the select board and the decision to go into executive sessions, that was not me, and that was not Anne individually bending everybody to our will. Those were collective decisions that were made, and so I in part take a little offense at being targeted for being some catalyst or having some ownership of it. And I do want to acknowledge that wasn't the best way to handle that particular situation, and that if there were better relationships between the individuals who were involved, I would have, maybe we would have had the opportunity to have a conversation about the appointment, but and not, you're acting surprised, and you're like,
Because Ann and I have been friends.
sure.
So she was on the select board deciding not to reappoint me and easily could have picked up the phone before the decision was made.
And I hear that. I can't say, and I don't think it's productive necessarily to get into, you know, why we made the decisions that we did, other than saying that, you know, nobody was going into it with the intention of hurting anybody. So, and you're being dismissive of that, and I'm just trying to articulate my positions.
She didn't intend to hurt anybody, but
here's the
the
right.
non-process you followed was very hurtful by not telling anybody, not talking to anybody, having Ann call Willa the night before the select board met and telling her that Dot and I weren't going to be appointed the day before the select board even met to make that decision. Really, Jordan, I mean, there was something really very uncomfortable from our point of view going on. And there's still this, and it still makes me very uncomfortable. You can say that there weren't relationships. There were relationships. I had a relationship with Ann.
Just for me, I was just speaking for
Oh, I
myself.
thought you were talking about.
No,
No.
just myself, just myself. I, with each of the members of the select board, I have gained the opportunity to have hard conversations. I am a relatively new member of the community. I've been around for 10 years in Calais. The family that brought me here has been around longer than that and has very deep connections through the community. I do care about the community. So I leave it at that. But if we could switch back to Dennis's point, and the quasi judicial, making appointments for the planning commission. Those for some of the other commissions or committees, subcommittees, that's where I see there being like a more purely policy driven application of or in consideration there. But the DRB is unique because it serves a quasi judicial role. However, it has been expressed that the DRB's only function is to just apply the regulations evenly and without bias. However, the regulations have inherent discretionary decisions that are built into them. There's there's the regulations, the Calais regulations say the DRB may 53 times. There's a lot of discretionary decisions, and it comes into that's what affords the community to make decisions relative to the circumstances that are coming before the board, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, maybe it says it 53 times, but for the most part, there are some very specific regulations. And sometimes it gives the DRB the discretion to issue a variance. But in general, it's very specific, and there's state regulations too that the DRB is also. About water quality and things like that. I mean, there are, I mean, the undue adverse effect, but even then, there are tons of decisions out in the world, in the Vermont world, judicial world, interpreting that. So it's not totally subjective and totally out there for anybody to interpret the way they want.
But the primary function is to look at circumstances and applications that are relative to conditional uses, situations where there need to be exceptions considered, at least, not maybe not accepted for sure, but considered.
About when you can make, when you can make an exception and when you can't. I mean, the regulations are pretty clear about that. I don't want to belabor it, but.
Dennis, so just for clarification then, trying to bring us back to the rules. Based on the appointments that you made, the decision that you made, are you saying that the DRB was not making the correct decision? That we were not interpreting those areas where there was vagueness. And I'll be the first, Ann and I have having numerous conversations about the challenges of the town plan. It says protect the environment, it says provide housing.
Right.
Yeah, that's difficult, but I believe the DRB, as Willa said, man, we pull those books out, we don't always agree, but I think we've come to good decisions. But I think what I'm hearing you say, based on your ability to influence policy, the decisions that you made about appointments, that we were not interpreting that correctly.
So.
And let me just.
Here, let me
just
kind
follow-
of, yeah, sure.
Let me just follow
Sure.
that up with, and if you felt that way, why wasn't there any feedback? Nobody came to the DRB. We never heard anything about that. No one ever said to us, oh, you're not interpreting that properly.
Well, that's one of my questions. Is there a defined process for giving feedback to the DRB?
Could you just pick up a phone and call the chair?
But yeah, but somebody who's just gone through a fairly contentious application process and feel like that they may not have had a fair shake of consideration relative to their circumstances. They may not be comfortable, and are we promoting an environment where they should feel comfortable to provide that feedback?
They can talk to the select board.
Yeah.
The select board would
I'm not
contact
saying the applicant
DRB.
should come to the.
Okay, that's interesting. So they'll contact the select board and say what?
Why not? I mean, I don't know what you just said, whatever you said. I'm very unhappy with the decision that was made. This is what I think your DRB members are out of their minds and stupid, and they don't know what they're doing. And I think you should consider getting rid of them and getting some new people who like to approve projects like mine. I mean, I don't know, but they wouldn't call up the DRB. And the select board would not interfere. It is absolutely not allowed to interfere during the process.
Correct.
Okay, but afterwards, if somebody's unhappy, they contact the select board, they tell them they're unhappy, and they tell them why. And the select board can contact the DRB and say, so-and-so is really unhappy, he said this, what do you think happened? You know, the DRB can explain its decision, it's perfectly capable of explaining to you, to appoint us, why we made a decision the way we did. And you might agree, and say, oh, geez, I didn't realize that, that's not what he said. Or you can say, man, you know, you guys are really out there with your interpretations, you know, I mean.
Yeah, but that could take a long, so, yeah, okay, well, thank you. So here we've made a decision and the process through which, or the lack thereof, as it has been said is not good enough or valid, or that it shouldn't. I mean, the sentiment has
You didn't talk to us.
okay.
That's the big problem. You didn't talk to us. You never called and told somebody on the DRB,
Yep.
oh, you know, people are complaining, it's too hard to get a permit. That's third hand. Well, should have contacted the DRB, should have met with us and said, so-and-so thinks it was too hard. What really happened from your point of view? You know, that would have been a productive dialogue.
Jamie.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the decision from my standpoint was based on a lot of community feedback, and I can't offer a specific example of specific decisions. It's not that finite. It's not that, oh, the DRB did a bad job in this situation, right? That's not what it was. It was more, I talked to a lot of people, and I was receiving general feedback that it felt like a time for a change for the DRB. And I didn't come into the discussion around it with any conclusions on what that would be. And I concur that our communication could have been a lot better and was lacking. And that was a mistake. I think it was. I agree with that. And I think that every member of the select board came to that conclusion for valid, good reasons. We may have used, you know, had better processes, but I think that it was based on the feedback we were receiving.
Candy.
Go ahead, I'll follow.
And I'm gonna do a time check about whether we're ready on the next item.
So first I want to thank Jamie and Jordan for acknowledging that the process wasn't great. That is significant to me and I appreciate that. And I think going forward, one of the things we've been talking about on the DRB is because we have heard these rumors that we don't really know exactly what they mean. We've talked, we have an administrative meeting in September to sort of work on these, but as Stephanie mentioned, we have, in my experience, we've had people come who are totally unprepared for a DRB hearing and really do not know what they needed to do, change midstream, and I'm sure it was super, super frustrating for those people. And I'm guessing, I don't know, that that's some of the feedback that the select board may have heard. So in terms of forward thinking, what we've discussed are three things. One is to look at the current permit application and make recommendations to the planning commission about how could that be improved? What could be different about this application? Secondly, having a document to help people, like what to expect at your DRB hearing, just basic information so people come better prepared and informed. And then the other thing was to solicit feedback, to have a formal process after a decision has been made to ask people, how did it go? What went well? What could have been done better? So these are just ideas that at the most recent meeting, which only had 4 of our 7 members, 6 or 8 if you include our alternates, thank you, losing track of members. So it's just preliminary thinking, but I just want to acknowledge that, you know, Scott and Gabrielle were part of that discussion, and we're, you know, so we are thinking about that. And so that is something to me that is important and can be valuable going forward.
Maybe we do have to,
I do. It was pretty much what Willa and Dennis had said, and others just acknowledging that the process itself up front is what what drove the frustration. It was the rumors that came out of it is that, you know, we didn't know what was going on and the lack of transparency. So we've already addressed all that, taken responsibility for it. The missing part that's really frustrating is that you had feedback from community members and you're keeping that in confidence, which I understand because you want people to be able to come to you in confidence, but it's still frustrating because what does that mean? Where was it? Was it specifically targeted at certain people after every time they had an application submitted? Was it the process itself? Was it not knowing what they were getting into? So we're gonna fix that going forward. We're not fixing the part of who said what to who. But I'm not sure that would be appropriate, honestly. Frustrating, but I don't think it would be appropriate to not have people want to come to you and talk about their frustrations. On the other hand, I feel like there was that gap of, okay, are we next? Like, what's missing? And what did we do wrong? Are we not following something that we should be? Are there things that we, you know, with the town plan and things changing, okay, what's going on? And then to your point, Stephanie, we follow the guidelines, we follow the law. There's not a lot of gray area there. So it's been a frustrating process. I don't think that we should target people and say, it's your fault, Jamie, that, you know, that Stephanie's not on here anymore, or Dot's not on here anymore. I would like to think that you don't have a personal agenda. I'd like to think that everybody on the select board doesn't have a personal agenda, and it's not personal. That said, there's been cases, right, that we have seen, and they didn't come out the way people wanted it to around this table. So you can't help but think that. But I would like to, believe in everybody that is volunteering for the town, that we are trying to make it better. And we are listening always, and we're trying to always advance and improve. So what's next? And I know that doesn't help for Dot and Stephanie, and I am so sorry that this has happened, and I am very sorry that you were deeply hurt by it. And I can understand why, and you've really given a lot to the town through the years, and I personally very much appreciate that. And now it's what can we do going forward so that this doesn't happen again to others, and that people in the community feel like they want to be on the board, or they want to volunteer on different boards, not just DRB, but others too, and know that they have support from the select board and there's going to be transparency. And if there's an issue, come to us. We can take it. We're all adults here. We can have conversations.
last word and then see if we're going to come up with a chat.
I want to respond to Jamie's comments about how she heard this and she heard that. I've been involved in land use issues in the state for a very long time. I was executive officer of the Act 250 program in the 80s and 90s. It's going on in the legislature all the time. Every time anybody starts talking about Act 250, bunch of people come out, all the developers, the chambers of commerce, and they all have horror stories. And once those horror stories, details come out, well, it turns out, oh gee, maybe there was another side to that. Maybe they're pissed because of some, you know, as we were talking about, maybe they didn't understand. You know, there's a lot of reasons why people are angry at regulators, especially land use regulators. But it doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the regulations or the people who are administering them. But if you don't say anything, if you don't find out the details and bring them, if you are making decisions about, for instance, my appointment, based on things you've heard about the behavior of the DRB or me or something I did or said, how can we function like that? you know, it's innuendo, it may be true, it may not be true, but you can't not find out. You can't just take people's word for it, people complaining because they didn't get what they wanted, and then turn around and make important decisions based on things you've heard, without coming to the board and saying, hey, we heard this, what happened? I think that's just fairness, you know, and if you don't wanna do that, then don't make decisions based on what you hear. If you're not gonna come to
I
talk
think
about
part of
it,
it was saving face,
to
right?
hear the other side, maybe you just shouldn't make decisions based on it, that's all. You know,
Okay, so the next agenda item that we said we'd talk about is talk about what our vision for the town is. We sort of get into some of that, but not sure you ready for that as a question.
I don't really understand the question, vision for the town.
When we met, there was a discussion about it would be good to talk about what our vision for the town is and how that, I suppose, impacts. It's in our town plan, how we deal with regulations, how we grow or don't grow.
I mean, I guess I'd add a caveat there, that, you know, it wasn't the intention to, you know, kind of hash through the specifics of the town plan. There's a process for that. The planning commission is involved in it in this moment, and I think they're doing a really great job of soliciting input from the community, looking at every section in a thoughtful way, and handling it in a fairly systematic way. And then as a select board, we added earmarked time and agendas to cover them, so that we have kind of that double exposure of having people participate. I mean, those who have been participating on these boards know that there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of effort put into things, and then inherently the public shows up at the last minute because they've just got word of it, and you feel like you've lost track with it. At the same time, I've certainly been in situations where I feel like I'm having a hard time keeping track of all of the conversations that I feel like I want to participate in. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done there as well. But I really want to kind of take some time, I guess, and it's still applicable in this section, to talk about the town plan and the values and how we communicate around the town plan, or how we use the town plan as a guiding document. Because under conditional use considerations, you have to meet the criteria of the conditional use standard, and in there it says taking into consideration the town plan and its values, and in the town plan there are competing interests. And so how do we, as a community and as board members, or as a quasi judicial body, weigh those things? We're in a period where we have fairly acute affordable housing issues. It's reality. So how are we looking at our processes? And I hear what you're saying, Stephanie, with Act 250, and I'm not, anti-regulation. I mean, that is your tool when you really need it, and your tool to help shape your community relative to the values that have been established by the community. But we as individuals and as a community need to be able to step back and look at our guiding documents incrementally and see if there had been unintended consequences for our decisions. And so I've experienced in my limited time in trying to interact with the governance of Calais, a certain unwillingness to have those conversations, and maybe that doesn't seem like a fair characterization for everybody, but that's been my experience. I've heard other people express to me that they feel like they've lost control of a community that they grew up in, and it doesn't feel the same, and that's a big one, that's an elephant, you know, I'm not trying to unpack that particular thing, but I've also heard something similar from professionals who say if you're trying to do anything development wise in Calais, don't bother, find another place. And I think that's highly problematic. I think both of those sentiments are highly problematic, even if it is just a misinformed characterization. It is a recurring theme that has been coming up. And so now in the context of the affordable housing issue, there are incremental decisions that get made through the weighing of an application that continue to add costs to the development process. And if we have the perception that either I need to skirt the regulations to avoid costs, or I need to hire attorneys and engineers and all of these things just to help guard myself against getting through the process, those are incremental costs that do add up and aggregate together and continue to add costs to adding housing inventory in the community that has expressed a desire to grow and support itself.
Well, I propose that the select board and the DRB have another meeting. And at that meeting, you guys from the select board tell us, I want to go through all the applications, all the permits that have come, and I'd like to know, because I haven't sat on anything controversial that I know of. You know, I didn't sit on your case. You know, I didn't sit on anything controversial. So, but the ones I reviewed, I would really love to know what's being said about them, because it's serious. It's very consequential when you're making decisions and you're concerned, and you have genuine concerns about things that you've heard, things people have told you, but you don't know, you haven't come to the DRB and said, wait, what happened here? You know, this person said it was really difficult to get through. What happened? You know, and maybe it was as simple as, well, they came to the DRB with no information, you know, because that's common. You know, there's just, we have to say, we can't rule on your application because we don't know the details. You know, and that happened several times on things I was sitting on, and what can we do? You know, they have to provide, the regulations say they have to provide certain information. So I'm just saying, I think it's important, it would be important for the DRB members who are ruling on applications to understand, and for you to understand what they might be doing, or we might be doing, that's considered obstructionist, or for you to understand what people are misunderstanding. Both might be happening, but I think it would be important to have this dialogue.
Andy?
Real quick, I'd like to believe that when people did come to you, that it was validated, that you were able to pull, either were aware of those situations that happened, or you were able to pull them, take a look at it, and then you were seeing a common theme. I would like to think that you did due diligence before any decisions were made.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That for me, personally, I can only speak for myself, but when somebody comes to me, like with that kind of feedback, first of all, I think I would like to think that people would trust that I would do that. I wouldn't be here and participating in these conversations if I wasn't interested in seeking that information. And to Dot's credit, the documentation of those cases make it easy to go in and see those things. I think there's a lot of work that can be done to make that just more cohesive, because it really kind of depends, and some of that is lack of preparedness, and some of it's just like lack of, some issues are more complex or less complex than the others, but through the minutes you can absolutely start to see patterns of lines of dialogue and questioning that provide feedback and data points that do raise concerns. And I disagree that, like, I don't think it would be worth getting too far down into the weeds on individual matters. But I do think that it would be more beneficial to the community to have more of these types of dialogues between certain boards, particularly the DRB, particularly the planning commission. There needs to be they have such a huge impact, immediate impact on the community that we need a system for that. So I'm more interested in having a dialogue about what is the process for that feedback? How are we going to capture it? How often are we going to look at it? When are we going to take a town plan, and what does it say in there? What is our measurement for trying to deliver on the aspirations and the values that are in the town plan?
I feel like we've moved kind of into the last item, which is what are the opportunities?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to name it for the future. And I don't know whether they're all meeting. The planning commission, the DRB, and the select board twice a year. People even suggested a few things a few minutes ago that would be helpful, but maybe that's where we can go for 10 more minutes and then for public comment.
If I just quickly add that I think the DRB is one part of the process and at the end of the process, and I think you can't look at, I mean, this, you use the phrase Jordan patterns of questioning, and that I think would be important for the DRB to hear that, and we may not want to go into the specifics of the past cases as Stephanie has suggested, but I do think there would be some value in having specific feedback that the DRB could digest and reflect upon. And I don't think, from what I've seen, you can separate out the permit application process, the regulations, and the plan, because they all funnel into the point where the DRB is making decisions. And so I don't think we can look at that in isolation, which is probably goes to Gus's point, the suggestion of joint conversations amongst more than just these two groups.
Scott, I don't want to pick on you, but because you're usually thoughtful and haven't said anything, you want to jump into the all right now, or you want to pass?
There's a lot to think about, a lot of good ideas that come up.
Speak up.
Oh, okay. A lot of good ideas have come up. I think, Jordan and Jamie have recognized that the process could have been better. I'd say it was awful. Thank you, Gus, for the opportunity.
There's two things I'd like to talk about in terms of going forward. The first is, I think that you should not go into executive session to talk about appointments of boards and commissions. The tradition has been in Calais that that's done in open session. Now, you don't have to do it, but I'm just saying, it just looks a lot better, number one. Number two, the public has a chance to hear something about the applicants. You know, I don't know that there were any public interviews of anybody. There used to be public interviews so that people could come and hear what the candidates, what would they like, and the select board asked some questions. And anyway, I just think that I don't see any point in going into executive session. I think it doesn't look right. You know, what are you hiding? You know, executive sessions, as you know, are supposed to be used rarely. They're not supposed to just be used when you might say something that's uncomfortable and you might not want Stephanie to hear it. You know, they're supposed to be used when you really need to do things privately. And I don't think discussing appointments is something you have to do privately. Also, I would ask that in the future, you talk to people before you make decisions about their appointments. You just talk to them, pick up the phone. Hey, you know, we've been hearing this or that about you.
May I just respond to that point? Before we went into executive session, none of us knew what the others were likely to do. All right, so we couldn't,
You call
you
roll.
couldn't call. I told her, I did not tell her we were going to reappoint you. I told her from what I was hearing, it's a possibility.
call me and say, we may not reappoint you, because I've been hearing these things, and I think maybe you shouldn't be on the board
Yeah,
anymore.
I think you've all made that point pretty clear. I shouldn't have done that.
Okay, so I'm
I
just
get
hoping in the future that you'll do that in the future.
Yeah,
With other
but
people.
the fact is, we can't tell you what our decision is until we talk to each other about it.
Well, you could still say you're thinking about it. You know, you're thinking about it. You can say we're thinking about it. That's what we might do. Do you want to come to the meeting and kind of make your case or something, or hear what the problems are? That seems to be pretty, common sense. The other thing I wanted to say was that Jordan was talking about, what do we do? There are contradictory statements in the town plan. I couldn't agree with you more. I think now is the time to do something, because they're working on rewriting it. Now is the time, and I think it's time consuming, but it's really worthwhile for everybody who's dealt with the town plan. And I know you did in your case, to go through it and find those things that are contradictory, that are difficult to interpret, and propose changes to the planning commission to try to clarify it. I mean, it needs to be clarified. I agree with you.
If I could just offer just a point of clarification, it's not contradictory, it's not like do this or do that. It's competing. It's competing.
Right.
And so neither of those things are inherently wrong. They are situationally specific and they need to be balanced. And sometimes in a point in time, one thing might need to be prioritized over another, and we need to continue to look at it and evaluate it and see how we're doing. And so it's not contradictory, it's compete. We're always going to have, hopefully, I would hope, we would always have a town plan that has some form of competing interests in there. Nothing can occupy.
Yeah, there's some things really outstanding, and there are outstanding things in there.
Sure.
Sometimes things can be modified in some of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes there can be something added to it, or, some caveat or something. That's all. I do think it's worth looking at and bringing them up and talking with the planning commission about when they created problems in the past.
But I guess it gets, you're right, I'm not disagreeing with you, but, and I love these conversations, honestly, like I really do. Because I think they're important. It's easy to sit in a room and have this conversation. It's so much harder to sit with a situation where you're in a gray area and then weigh those things out. We will likely have a lot of alignment as a community around, we would like to be a place where people feel welcome in adding homes, or we want to conserve natural resources and protect sensitive habitats and all of those things. And I'm not making a judgment on any one of those things being inherently better than the other. They're just always going to be competing interests. But as a select board, that's where it kind of gets back into the policy thing. Those are always going to be weighed by a board, and you want it weighed by a board because it diversifies and diffuses bias. If it were so black and white that this is just what we're doing, then we would just need a zoning administrator to apply that. It would be a remarkable amount of work, and there's obviously statute that says there needs to be a DRB, but it's not that black and white. And we do need to diversify the representation and the skills and the understanding of all of those things on the committees and the commissions and the boards.
And for your information, right now, the Conservation Commission is working on the natural resources section of the town plan. We are trying to work some of this out. So there would be areas where the natural resources need to be protected and areas where development will be encouraged, sort of just what the legislature did just recently. Okay, they're working on that. Everybody, the Conservation Commission is meeting every 2 weeks. We're working on the natural resources section of the town plan. We're meeting. Our meetings are noticed. They're on Front Porch Forum. We're on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock, and everybody's welcome because we're working on that right now. It's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's always going to require some judgment, but we are trying to deal with it in some kind of objective way. And if you want to have input, come to our meetings.
Dennis?
Well, it's just building on that, it's never going to be perfect, so I don't want us to have these elevated expectations. And Gus, I think you started this by saying, sometimes people don't get the jobs they want. Sometimes people don't get the answers they want. And a lot of rhetoric, such as nobody's listening to me. Believe me, DRB is listening, we just might not give you the answer you want. But we're trying to do the job that we're supposed to do. So, you know, it's not a perfect world. You know, it's as long as we have these regulations and we have a board that's supposed to interpret them. People sometimes are gonna be asked to do things that they weren't expecting to do. They may have to spend some money they weren't planning to spend. But, you know, we're trying to uphold the regs in the town hall. And I guess the other thing I would add is, it doesn't, I've heard a lot that maybe makes me feel like the select board wants to influence the town plan by its appointments. And I would just say, remember, the town plan's adopted by the whole community, it's not the select board, it's the town plan. It's right, it's voted on in the end by the whole town.
No, I think the select board adopts the town plan, the town adopts the zoning.
Oh, I
The
think
town adopts the zoning and the select board adopts the
I
town plan.
stand corrected.
Yeah, that's the way it is now. But that doesn't mean they can rewrite it.
Right.
I mean, it goes through a process and there's public hearings and everything else. They can't just sit down and rewrite the town plan and adopt it. But they do have the ultimate.
Is there any other new thoughts anybody wants to put on the table about for the future, or are we ready to open this up to public comment? That's
One idea that the DRB had discussed is for the select board to have some written statement about what is the process for appointments. For example, Candy and I were both interviewed before we were appointed by the previous members of the select board. And I think that could be helpful for future applicants to know that the select board, this is the process the select board follows when appointing people. And I realize you might not want that for every single committee and commission board, but there are probably a few that have more impact on people's lives. And so I would like to put that idea on the table.
And to follow up, and what are the criteria? So if people know what the criteria are, what you're looking for, then people will know whether they meet those criteria. I mean, that's pretty common thing to do when you have, you know, what is it you're looking for? What does this job entail?
I mean, I think that's fair. I've been wrestling through that myself and with in other conversations and just kind of seeking guidance on how to kind of work through that. I think it's important. I think, for me, it's easy to say that, ooh, sure, the solutions is just to say that there needs to be a process, because the most recent example is that there wasn't one, and that resulted in hurt feelings. But I can also see a situation where you define a process like that, and we're a small community. We keep saying that. So what happens, even if we sit in a room and we all have an agreement on what we want to be the ideal representation, but we still need to have people in those seats, we can't find them. You know, it would be great to have architects on there. It would be great to have a builder on there or at least an engineer or a project manager or something. Somebody who lives and breathes in that particular space and can be the expert representation of that perspective. And again, it comes back to the costs for me. If there's somebody on the board who can speak to the validity of somebody's plan, even if they didn't go out and hire a professional, they are themselves a professional with a perspective that can say, yeah, you're on the right track. That's fine. That is acceptable. We don't need you to go out and get a fully engineered whatever. And so, but you can't get a builder from the community to sit on the board because they're going to have conflicts of interest all over the place. And it's hard to find the engineer. It's hard to find the perfect scenario for every representation if we were going to create little models of who we would want to be on there. So how do we work through the secondary decisions
You could
and
try.
considerations?
Try, just.
We just did. We just didn't do it well,
Well, I think one of the things that I heard you say.
or through a process that you felt was transparent, and that I acknowledge for sure. But that is literally what we just tried to do.
But then you can set out, well, I think what we're suggesting, just set out the process in writing, we're gonna, solicit people, we might look for X kind of people, or maybe not, but we're then going to interview people publicly, then we're gonna, just that basic process.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's more dialogue to be had around it. I'm not comfortable just like going headlong into forming a committee to start defining that, but I do think that particularly for certain boards, and that's part of it. So like part of the response of this particular select board, who didn't have a lot of experience going through this, and from my perspective personally, I was not comfortable just coming into every year and just rubber stamping a slate of candidates for every position. It doesn't feel like a genuine consideration. And so now we've started to kind of work on breaking that apart, and we knew that the DRB was important. We know that the planning commission was important, but we haven't written these things down. And I don't want to be careful not to devalue any of the other subcommittees by saying, well, you're just not as important. We're just going to accept folks, so we have to work through that conversation for sure. And be more mindful and deliberate with those decisions.
I think there was a time when anybody who wanted to be on it, including incumbents, had to come to the interview. You had to apply, and that, just because it was your position, doesn't mean you're looking. There's 3 other people who want to be on it. All you come and we'll interview you all and we'll choose it. I thought that was a great.
I just gotta make an editorial comment to say, I think that's a really fair process. I do want to say, I think the select board had a super busy year last year, with things that probably diverted their attention. I want to give Candy the floor, and then I really do want to open up
This is
public
just-
comment.
It's really quick, and it's really about what you're both saying. And one of the things that I heard repeatedly when we met was that you were looking for different perspectives and you were looking for balance. So you, like you said, an architect or an engineer, and what each individual can offer, not heavy-sided over here, not heavy-sided over here, but really looking for balance and different perspectives. I think that we all worked together when we were doing our job as DRB, and we all had, different ways of thinking. We didn't always agree on everything, and I think that's really important. And I hope that that's, and what I'm hearing, I've had conversations with Jordan, briefly with Ann, I just met Jamie tonight. But what I have heard through our meetings was that it's really important with the town plan moving forward, the direction we're going with public input, is that we do have balance on the boards, and not just DRB, but on all of our boards. And I don't think that you can put that in a box. I think we can do an outline of, it'd be nice to have this, and this, but it depends on who's on there at the time, and you might have different needs at that point.
Okay, we're ready for public comment.
So, as chair of the planning commission, who is taking on the town plan as one of its children, number 5, I like that.
And principal of Calais Elementary School.
And new principal of Calais Elementary School. I love hearing, I think I heard 54 times, so there's more of it than May, and then regulations, but, first thing I want to say is that I feel like the town plan, it kind of goes in multiple directions. And in one, it's this broad visionary document that sits there to guide the town. We're taking cues from Selectboard as the judicial, or not the judicial, the legislative body of the town to sort of build off of. And we're making it broad. We're trying to be broad, but at the same time, we talk about it all the time. John McCullough says this all the time. When there becomes a moment when DRB has a question, when there's a discretionary moment, you revert back to the town plan, right? You can use it, okay, well, what does this really mean? What did the town want from this? So we do have this difficult balance between broad and specific competing interests. We are working on that. That is one of the things that we are doing. We are trying to get out contradictions, not competing interests, because they are two different things. Some of them you cannot. More housing and protecting more land. Those things are just going to be competing, just are. But I've heard a lot tonight, you know, we have a section that's municipal services. It lists all the commissions and boards and things. I think maybe having one about the DRB process, maybe pulling that out as part of something could be, not the whole process, not all the things you're talking about, because that's way too specific for example. But being a little more like the DRB is, here's what it is, and laying that out. Town plan does have action steps. Those action steps could include improving, right, the process for permitting and what that looks like. Again, we just are trying to put goals, things in it. That's what it looks like. Gus, I love your suggestion of the three getting together a couple of times a year, right, or something like that. So, I love everything you're hearing. I tried to take notes. I think there's a lot here that as we build the town plan going forward, we want it to be nimble. When I used to teach economics in high school, we used to teach them that we were preparing them for jobs that didn't exist. Well, we are preparing a town plan that won't be the same 3 years, and in 5 years, and in 10 years. It just won't. We're trying to build a nimble, broad, yet specific and workable town plan. But that gives DRB direction as well, right? That you can go, okay, this is, right, letter of the law versus spirit of the law. Well, what was the spirit of it? Right, so when you come to a question, well, should we build X? Well, what does the town plan say? Right, you can get to that point. So, just like you pointed out, Stephanie, we have meetings every 2 weeks. I'm putting out the drafts of every plan for people to comment. I'm telling you, we've had half a dozen public comments. So that's not a lot. And so same thing, we're putting that out there, but I would love to have DRB's input, especially on that part when we get to, you know, the future as we look forward with this process. So tomorrow night, there is one. And every other Tuesday, so we'd be happy to have you. That helps.
Thank you.
So I'm Donna Helling, I was on the DRB. Jeremy, we looked at town plan with virtually every decision, especially when there were discretionary regs. So it's not that that hasn't been done, it's been done from the get-go. Jordan, you say the process wasn't in existence, but there's still no reason. I don't see the new people who were appointed as setting that sort of diverse balance that you're looking for. And are you saying that no matter whose seats came up for renewal, they would have been moved aside? Is that what you're saying? Or is it really about the two of us? I was called an obstructionist by one of the applicants. I have an environmental leaning, feel very strongly about environment. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna decide against development. But we had one applicant who showed up for a site review. And as we're standing there, we realized that the right of way that was in the application and being proposed, as he had done a lot of investigation on and thinking, he had changed it. You know, he started talking about it coming from a different direction. And so Ryan, who was our chair at the time, said, we can't do that. You have to give us a new site plan. Well, we reset so he could go get this new site plan and submit it. And then we continued the meeting. But yet in the next meeting, I guess, I don't think Stephanie was there, but you were there. He called me an obstructionist. And I was doing my job. So it would have helped if you had talked to us and said, so if somebody says, you know, you won't let them build it right away. What was going on? That's what was going on. That kind of thing. And we had applicants who didn't like the result because, you know, we were preserving wetlands or wildlife crossings or whatever, and you couldn't build a big road that you wanted to put into the property. That's in our regs. I really recognize that everyone in this room cares about the town and is trying to do what we think is best, and that we all have different perspectives. I appreciate, Jordan, that you're acknowledging the things that we've done. But there's still some things that eat at me, and I will say to you that I was very hurt, and very disillusioned in the town process. When Ann told Willa not to tell us that we might not be reappointed, Willa met with us the next night with myself and Ryan to discuss her transition to chair. And Ryan was leaving, but with my assistance, because I was the clerk. When Ann called me after the decisions had been made, she said it was because of the different direction that you folks wanted to take. And that's not the purpose for our seats on the DRB. We don't create directions. We don't put perspectives. We apply the regs, we apply the town plan. That's what we do, and that's what we did well. And there was a change in the DRB just 2-3 terms ago when Stephanie and I came on. And we started to apply the regs and do our job the way it should be done. And not just based on what people wanted or who they liked, but what they heard. So you're wrong, you know, you're dancing around the whole issue. One thing I feel really strongly about, and I hope you'll address it, is that you really need to define conflict of interest. Gus disclosed his connections, and I know he has a lot, and that was appropriate. Rachel didn't come, I believe, in part because you're her dad.
No, in fact, had she come, I would not get to her speaking.
Really?
Well, I'm facilitating a meeting, there's no, from my perspective, no conflict of interest. I would not tell my wife she couldn't speak at town meeting, that's still.
Okay, but that's something,
I gotta go home.
that's something this town has to sort out. When Kari Bradley went into executive session with a discussion about whether or not.
Wait, I'd like to correct that. So that is not okay.
It's not open.
No, characterizing Kari in a way that calls into question his integrity. There may be an inaccuracy. He did not go into the executive session. You were correct in calling out that we took up 2 matters under executive session that night.
But you also had him in session.
We invited him into session to discuss another employee's, and then he left when we went to have a conversation about the appointments.
You never said that. You never clarified that. How did you tell us that?
Why didn't anybody ask?
We did. And she asked. It was pointed out in March.
You came straight out with an accusation of nepotism.
Well, yes. That's what it looked like.
That's not asking. Well, just, please don't dismiss me. I don't understand how your position gets to be validated for the courtesy of a phone call, and then it's not reciprocated for a courtesy of phone call on the other end.
And it was after that.
Executive session.
I think
that's
we
all
need
it
to
said.
let Doc finish.
So,
Yes,
well,
please, it was after that, Jordan. And nothing was said that he was in there for a specific reason, that he stepped out when we started to talk about his wife. So there was the perception, the appearance of impropriety of a conflict of interest. You need to figure that out when you go forward with your procedures. I'm not gonna say a lot more because a lot of it seems to be fruitless, but I will say that I'm really concerned about what appears to be an underrepresentation of all parts of town. You know, we have 3 outstanding communities in this town. We have Maple Corner, we have East Calais, and we have Adamant. And I believe of late, East Calais has had the most attention. And then Maple Corner, all for good causes. The dam is an important thing to be addressed. But there are other things going on in other parts of town. And you need to start getting not just engineers, but people who come from other parts of town and don't just identify with what's going on in East Calais. That's all.
Would anybody else like to speak? Anybody who is on screen? Raise your hand or. Your video, put your video on, turn your video on. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm Rose Welch, I'm the recording secretary for the Cal Select Board. I've done my best to try to capture the essence of this meeting, but I actually just did not write, I couldn't possibly write all of her comments. I'm right now telling you, please excuse, I'm doing the best I can. Like I said, trying to capture the essence, and, I think we all will clearly remember your comments and Stephanie's passion. And I love and hear your thoughts. Jared, I appreciate your hard work on the planning commission, and I appreciate the hard work of the DRB and what you do, in the Calais Select Board, and, yeah, that's what I want to say. So when you see the minutes and say it wasn't in the minutes, this is, yeah, there's no way.
That's.
So, first, Andrews.
That's husband.
So this meeting is a classic example of this town, where we have some issues. And we have some very distinct differences, viewpoints on what has transpired, how things are going, how the city is going, directions of the town. All very different. And it's how does this community continue to move forward? And it's hard to do when you have some very different opinions. My perspective is that it has to be in this format, as hard as this format is, and I understand everyone's schedules are very full. But there's some significant issues facing this town. The flood, schools, the town plan. Really big issues, and the select board, you guys are really in the hot seat. You are. I get that. But it seems to me, one of the remedies is developing some protocols to address whether it's the connections, because there are generations that have been here. There are people who are popping into the Maple Corner store, chatting with Jamie. There are all these little conversations that go on every day. Whether, best friends may not agree, still best friends, you bump into each other at the store and you see it, you're over in Montpelier, you're, adamant, you bump in and you have all these conversations that are going on. But it seems there needs to be a little more direction in how to address those so that there aren't so many decisions made on, oh, well, I'm hearing from Dave over, up Ken Corner that, over at Adamant, they're doing this, or, it just seems there needs to be some more protocols on how to address some of these issues. And it's not an easy thing.
Jeff Van, came here for a variety of reasons. More than a decade ago, there was discussion of the town plan that got me interested in how the town zoning went ahead. I'm struck today, Dennis, and I don't mean to be critical, just interesting that you weren't exactly sure who adopts the plan versus the regs. No, this, and you're on the DRB. So I find that interesting. So I think, one of the things we as a town can do better is making sure everybody understands. Select board approves the town plan at this point, I think. Used to be different, I think, some years ago. The regs are approved by the town at the town meeting day, arguably, I think that's right still. And I think Georgie talked about, I'll call it my words, and words perhaps, friction between conservation and development. That's been around since the sixties and seventies when we started to realize, wait, development does have an impact on land, on the air, on the water. We saw it most, and this conversation is very apt right now, very timely. Last week, a few miles from here, Plainville was, plowed, got hammered. Because of climate change, and that's a real issue. So I think we've got to figure out how to develop in a spirit of, yes, we want people to have a home they can afford, but we also don't want to toss out our vision and goals for conservation. That's a struggle you're gonna have to go through. And good luck. Thank you. Unfit child. Yeah. Hope the delivery goes well. So I do think this is a good conversation to try to pay attention more as you go forward, because I think it's important. It's too bad that there are some birth games here, and how that process goes, but I think going forward, we need to be more transparent about the process. So we all understand what it is we're tackling and why and which direction we're going in, including whether if the select board thinks that there's not enough development, that'll be an open and transparent conversation. And it will come, I guess, in the form of a planning document. And the regs they're implementing the plan, I guess how it works. You've got to do one without.
Okay, we are past time. Scott, you had your hand up, you want the last word?
Well, this is something I heard Gus say. And it was recently, spoken without attribution to Gus. But I quote, while we may disagree, we're not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we are fellow residents of Calais. Thank you, Gus, for that. Was our personal yesterday. Each guy.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'd like to say.
I was asking Rose if she could hear.
But it was I heard it, but it was very nice. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say the world is a mess, and I hope we won't have to be a part of it.
Fair.
That's right.
Are we ready to adjourn?
I just want to say, I think this meeting demonstrated that people can do just what Scott did.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for participating in the conversation and working through the dialogue. There's more work done on a lot of fronts. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all. for
Thank
your
you.
service.
Uh,
Good evening.
entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Any discussion? Great. All in favor? Thank you, Scott.
For a while.
So I feel like.
Very controversial. We have controversial, but for me, it's not controversial at all because he had kept it a position, so he was like teaching at very school. As a district. I received, assistant principal position at very and like 2 weeks, I think, and then he was contacted about the Calais, and so to superintendent said, I think you need to release me from a contract. Can I even consider this a pretty significant difference and also, the commute was great. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's
And I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,